Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here for another Monday this and that video where I answer a few questions, give you some updates on whatever's going on around here and whatever I feel like talking about. So let's get to the topics of today, starting off with the baking soda. So I actually did just shoot a video that's going to be a standalone one on the baking soda, because of the video I had that came out recently on tooth powder and my current recipe and using baking soda, and people saw that I was using Arm & Hammer baking soda and got a little concerned because of the assumption by many still today that baking soda, unless otherwise noted, has aluminum in it. But this is a misconception. Any pure baking soda that you buy, whether it be Arm & Hammer or any other brand, is naturally aluminum free. They don't add aluminum to baking soda. Where the misconception comes from is that store-bought baking powders for many years added aluminum in them because of the combination of the baking soda and cream of tartar. So you have a base and you have an acid that are being combined together in a powder form. Just think what happens when you combine baking soda with vinegar. But since they're in powder form, you don't immediately get that reaction. However, the combination of these two things will then become solid in whatever container they're in. And so aluminum was the common thing added to baking powders as a drying agent to prevent that clumping or hardening. Now, because of what we've learned about aluminum, more and more companies have got away from adding aluminum to their baking powder and have resorted to using other means, such as adding some kind of starch. So when you make your own baking powder, if you want it pre-blended, you have to add something like tapioca starch, arrowroot powder, like I think it's a tablespoon per cup. I'll link to the video I did on making your own baking powder and what I do in the description box down below. I actually just keep them separate, baking soda, and over there I have another jar with cream of tartar, and I just put in a little bit of each and whatever I need baking powder in. So it's that simple. I just don't even bother blending them anymore. Besides, when you blend them, it lowers the shelf life. Where keeping those two things separate, you're going to have a longer shelf life. So I just wanted to clear that up. Arm & Hammer baking soda does not have aluminum in it. No baking soda should. There's no reason for it to be in there. And then the next thing is I had a question in regards to vinegar and SCOBYs, or the mother, as some people refer to it. I've heard it said that if it's a vinegar, it's called a mother, and if it's kombucha, it's a SCOBY. Well, kombucha is basically just vinegar made from tea. So call it whatever you want. It's still a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. That is where the acronym comes from. And that's why I always capitalize it, so people understand it's not a word on its own, it's actually an acronym. So this right here is my most recent batch of apple scrap vinegar. So I've got peels and cores in here from the last batch of apples I was working up. And it is not common to have a SCOBY form during that month-long process of vinegar making, but it can happen. I have had it happen. In fact, this image right here shows a SCOBY that formed in the process while the vinegar was actually still fizzy. That doesn't happen that often, but it can. However, when you're talking about SCOBYs developing on your vinegar, it usually happens after it's put in storage, and it usually only happens on certain types of vinegars, apple and peach being two of the most common. In fact, the peach vinegars, again using scraps, the pits, the peels, on those I typically get the biggest and the most amount of SCOBYs. As you can see in this image right here, I had one that was that big because it sat in storage for a while. So usually the longer they sit, the bigger the SCOBY gets. However, Not all vinegars will form a SCOBY, or even if they do, it might just be a paper thin one, or maybe a few that are very thin. So it is rare for me to develop a SCOBY on any of my herbal type vinegars. I have had some, but again, those have just been very thin, like you can see in this image right here. So don't feel disheartened if your vinegar does not develop a SCOBY. A SCOBY is not a sign as to whether or not your vinegar is actually vinegar. So one person thought that her vinegar wasn't vinegar because there was no SCOBY on it. But she was making it out of things that don't typically form a SCOBY anyway. The true sign of a good vinegar is, does it taste like vinegar and does it smell like vinegar? That's the best thing to go by, but you can also get pH strips and do tests that way. I did that for a little while. I rarely do that now. And even then, you want to make sure if you're going to test it, you pour a tiny amount into the smallest container you can, so you have just enough to get that pH strip wet with a vinegar, rather than sticking it directly in your jar, because you don't know what kind of chemicals are on your pH strip. And that's a good way to test. And you're looking for a pH that's between, well, 2.5 to 3. 3.5 is still good. And anyway, through the years, I think initially I used to say a pH of 4, but actually the lower the pH, the higher the acidity of your vinegar. So it's a good indicator. You can even have it down to a 2. So that's the pH. Lower pH means higher acidity. A lot of people get those two things mixed up. So it said that a pH of about 3 is 5% acidity, like what you would normally buy in your regular vinegar in the store. All right, and then let's talk a little bit about, since we're like right at the tail end of gardening harvest, really, I still have a lot of apples on my tree, still trying to get them all off of there and either give them away or make more stuff with them. So yeah, so I just keep making more vinegar because coming back to that, I'm finding more and more uses all the time for vinegar. So every year I seem to go through more of it. So I decided I'm going to put up more vinegar than I initially planned with the apples, even though I've got a lot of herbal vinegars. But there's that. But the other current thing going on right now is the putting up of the dry beans from my runner beans here. And this is my first jar. I've got a second jar started right here. So I still have a lot of beans that are drying out in the greenhouse. And once they get to a certain point, I'll bring them in and put them next to the wood stove and let them finish drying there, so that the pods can become very crisp like that. Okay, so if you've never done the dry beans. So the runner beans, these are the Scarlet and Sunset runner beans. These are my favorite ones to grow because they're so beautiful. I can get a lot of green beans off of them when I pick them young. In fact, I just had a video come out on the beans. So you can go back and watch that. I'll link to it down below. But I just wanted to show you right here, since now I'm at that point that the beans are getting dry and I'm ready to start, and I've been shelling a bunch of them. You just wait until they're really crispy. Now I find with these particular beans, the pod on them does tend to be a little tougher than, let's say, on the purple potted pole beans, which that's what's here. So I grew a bunch this year just so I could have a lot for seed. I did can up a few of them, but mostly my purpose was to put them up for seed. So these, that's what they look like when you first take them out. They actually will turn brown. Now, I don't have any lids on these right now. I just have the cloth to keep dust out because I want to make sure those beans are fully dry before I vacuum seal them up and then put them away. So some of these will be used to sell or plant next year, while the rest will be used for making meals. But anyway, once they get to this point, you just open them up. It's a lot easier when they're fully dry, and there goes a bean on the floor. And then you get the beans out, just scrape them right out. So I was doing this with Jace yesterday, and he was enjoying picking up the beans and putting them in the jar for me. So that was kind of a cool thing. I put the grandbabies to work there. So I just wanted to show you that that's the main garden thing I have going on right now. I do have all my pumpkins in. I have 2 more that are just my last 2 that I didn't expect to get because I thought it was totally over. And then one of my plants put out 2 more. One's just like this big, but it's cute. And the other one's a little bigger, about the size of that one there. But I've got them out in the windowsill over here to finish turning orange. But so I ended up with, I think, 13 pie pumpkins, which is pretty good. And then down the road after Thanksgiving is over, usually early December, late November is when I then start dealing with the pumpkins. And so then I bake them and I dehydrate them, and I have a video on that if you'd like to learn more and about the uses of the pumpkin powder, because yes, you can make pies with them and they are so good. So I'll link to that video down below, but I'll be talking about that more in future this and that videos when I get to that point. So yeah, my tomatoes are done. Pretty much everything else is done. Oh, and my carrots. I'm still bringing in carrots here and there. Right now, I'm just leaving them out there until I need them. So last night I baked up a roast and used some of my try to use up those little tiny potatoes first. In fact, what I did this year is I put my biggest potatoes in one box, that I didn't can, by the way. Then on the next box, I make sure I pack them in such a way that they have airflow. Next box, I put like the medium-sized potatoes. In the top box, I put all the teeny tiny potatoes. So I'm using those up, and then I went and picked some fresh carrots and put those in there. And oh man, carrots from your own garden just do not come. I mean, they are so much better than anything you can buy anywhere. Same thing with tomatoes. Well, same thing with pretty much any fruit or vegetable you can grow yourself. So that's pretty much it as far as what's going on around here. Just coming to that tail end. I do still have lots of rosemary out there that I'm thinking, since it's still looking really fresh and good, I might cut some of that back and just get some more hair wash vinegar made with that. And I do have some nasturtium flowers still coming in, so I can add those in too if I want. And then another thing I wanted to cover is that some of you might have seen my video where last week or the week before, where I was talking about blanket health statements. Well, the funny thing was about that is that it just seems like this happens on so many videos like that, where that's what the video is about. Then somebody will come in and make a blanket health statement. And so I want to explain something. Now, I mentioned in the video how I have a blood trait that comes from my Mediterranean descent, that would be Italian, called thalassemia. It's just a blood trait. Some people might call it a disease. I don't call it a disease, it's just a trait. And this trait means that I have to be very careful about the iron consumption I get. So I try to avoid foods that are naturally high in iron, which isn't too hard since I really don't like liver, but I do cook in a lot of cast iron. And the thing is, really naturally occurring iron is rarely an issue, as long as we're not taking any supplements that contain iron. And so what this means is we easily can build up too much iron and other types of metals in our blood when we have this trait. So then somebody decided to come in and make a blanket health statement saying that, well, high iron in your blood means you need more copper. No, that is not correct. That might be true for some people, but a blanket health statement like that can put other people at risk of overdoing it with copper. So I have found that when it comes to pretty much any metals, I have to be very careful about my consumption. So copper, yes, I have to be careful with that too. Pretty much any of them, even zinc, I have to be careful with, because these metals, be they beneficial or not, can too easily build up in our blood and then make us very ill. So I want to stress this again. Please be careful about the kind of blanket health statements you make to other people, because you don't know what that person, what their health issues are, or if they have some kind of trait due to their genetics that mean they can't go that way. So a better way to word things would be, for some people, a high iron, too much iron means they need copper. Again, you got to focus on, if you believe it might be helpful, suggest it by making sure they understand this is what works for some people, or this is what worked for me. I can't say for certain if it's what you need, but it might be something to look into, rather than just making a straight blanketed statement, because it's not going to apply to everyone. So if I had followed that person's advice, I could become very, very sick. And I know this because I tried taking copper and it made me ill. But I started small. Even a small amount makes me ill. If I'm taking it, if it's occurring naturally in the foods and herbs that I'm eating, it's not an issue. But adding it as a supplement in any form, just like with the iron and anything else, is bad news. Well, I really think that was it for my this and that for the week. And I just want to thank everyone for the video that came out last week. I didn't even know if it was going to do very good, where I was talking about the future of my channel. And so many people came in there and showed so much love and support. And that video did really good. And I really appreciate that. So that means good. Maybe the word's going to get out there so the people that really want to see my content can actually start seeing it again. I'm really hoping that. It's not so much at this point about me wanting more followers, more subscribers, and views outside of what I once used to get. I just want my followers that want to see my content to be able to see my content. So thank you for that. You did. That is a big help. And now people will at least know, and by you commenting and getting in there and showing that support, that pushes that video out there more. So now more people that already follow me will know what's going on. So anyway, again, I thank you so much. You guys have been such a great support to me for the past 9 years or so. We're going kind of creeping up on 9.5 years now. And I really enjoy what I do. And I love being here. So again, I'm going to continue to stay on YouTube and Rumble as long as I am able. I don't know how long that will be, but my plan is to just keep pressing forward. And any thoughts, ideas you'd like to share, remember those comments are helpful in many ways. They help other people. They get to read your wisdom. They help boost my channel and the algorithms, and they help encourage me too. And so make sure you share those. Don't forget to like. And if you're not subscribed or you became unsubscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.